Welcome everyone. I'm Rolf Blythe. I'm the executive director at Arion Press. And we're gathered here tonight to celebrate a collaboration between Mai Der Vang, a poet, and artist Tiffany Chung, both of whom will be in conversation tonight with Carmen Giménez, publisher and executive director of Graywolf Press. Mai Der and Tiffany have collaborated with Arion Press on a limited edition broadside that we will release this evening at the reception that follows. As a fine press dedicated to creative collaborations across the literary and the visual arts, broadside collaborations have been particularly fruitful projects for Arion. Apart from allowing us the opportunity to work with a range of artists and poets on kind of a contained project, one that doesn't necessarily span thousands of words or hundreds of pages, as our books do. These broadsides themselves are specifically designed to engage, to pack a punch, and they're often launch pads for larger cultural conversations. And that is how we described their value when we connected with two specific donors, Dan and Gloria Logan, who were interested in supporting the press in creating a series of broadsides that facilitate conversations like this one. The work we do here to celebrate, the work we're here to celebrate tonight is the first of three in the Logan Broadside series. So we want to thank Dan and Gloria Logan and the Ravadas Foundation for their generous support of this program. So for those of you who are new to Arion or the community that we're building here at Fort Mason, I'll start with kind of a brief introduction to the press and then move on to welcome our guests to the stage. Arion is the only printer in America to make books entirely by hand from comma to cover. Our fully integrated hot type foundry, just 2 floors below us here, our letterpress printing studio and book bindery is the only such facility in the US. Now in its 51st year, Arion invites the world's leading artists to reimagine literary classics in collaboration with our team of expert bookmakers. Each Arion title is crafted in our historic workshop downstairs. In our foundry, the machines that once cast the type for the UN Charter now produce contemporary artist books for artists like Laurie Anderson, Patti Smith, William Kentridge, Kara Walker, and Claire Rojas, and Ala Abdakar. Arion creates work that pushes the limits of traditional craft and develops bespoke public programs and educational initiatives that connect our publishing with audiences of all ages. So tonight we're thrilled to welcome Tiffany Chung and Mai Der and our friends at Graywolf Press for what's sure to be a wonderfully rich conversation. If you're not familiar with Graywolf, we hope to change that tonight. We, as a Minneapolis native and a former wolf myself, I'm perhaps a little biased, but I, am continually impressed with the growth and evolution of their organization over the last 50 plus years. There's a relentless commitment to featuring and supporting diverse voices and perspectives. Their championing of work that might otherwise be overlooked or doesn't fall cleanly into a category. And the sheer talent, really, that they pack under one roof. The writers, the poets, the editors there, in my mind, really continue to set the bar and push the boundaries of what an independent publishing company can and should be. So we're thrilled to have everyone here tonight. It's a real treat to have Carmen Giménez, publisher and executive director of Graywolf, with us to chat with Mai Der and Tiffany. A little bit more about Carmen's background before I welcome her to the stage. Carmen is the author of numerous poetry collections, including Milk and Filth, a finalist for the NBCC Award in Poetry, and Be Recorder, which was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award in Poetry. The PEN Open Book Award, the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry, and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. She was awarded the Academy of American Poets Fellowship Prize in 2020, 2019 Guggenheim Fellow. She served as publisher of Nomi Press for 20 years. She's currently the publisher and executive director of Graywolf, and I'd love to welcome Carmen to the stage.
So thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled about this collaboration. When you are work in publishing, collaboration is just part of the work. And broadsides are just such a beautiful, ephemeral expression of two artists coming together and conceptualizing and speaking to each other. There's a kind of homage that happens and a synergy, and I'm really excited to talk to Mai Der and Tiffany tonight. And so I welcome you to the stage. And we'll talk a little bit about the work and about the broadsides. I think what I'd like is just for you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about the work, and we can just jump in and take it from there. This is a really exciting time. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And my goal is to recede into the background, because this is a chance for both of you to talk probably at a level that you haven't had a chance to talk, because now you've seen it in person. And I guess I'd start there. What was it like to see the work in person, to see it right in front of you?
I'll start by saying that it was so just inspirational to see the final product and to see what can be achieved, right? Just through the collaboration and again, I can't express, and I've heard people express it too, just the work, the craftsmanship that went into creating this broadside was stunning. I mean, you can see the transparency of those vellum sheets coming through so beautifully. So yeah, I'm just thrilled. I'm so excited.
Well, I guess I'm really excited too. I mean, just the fact that the Arion Press managed to pull it off, because I know my work is not easy to be reproduced. So yeah, thank you so much. And also seeing your poem on it too, right? This is not the first piece that I made for your poem. I tried several. I think you're gonna see one of them in my slides. But the key for me was how do I strike a balance between the visual and the poetry, and also letting the poetry, the poem, take the center stage. So. Mm-hmm. There you go. That's your work.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily give you an easy poem to work with either. I mean, it's quite an unusual poem, which I can talk more about too.
But it's the fact that it's so visual. It's just it makes it easier to work actually, because you already made it that way. So I just kind of follow that lead.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about your work and your career. And I thought what was striking is that both of you engage with memory and displacement and Southeast Asian history in your work. And so I wonder if you could each talk a little bit about, I guess, as an introduction to your work and how how you are here. And yeah, let's start there.
So I'm a poet. I write poetry. I've been doing that ever since I was young. And I've been very lucky to be able to publish 3 books with Graywolf Press, and you can see them all here. And I just was thinking about the timeline of these books, how they came out every 4 years, which is frightening, right? Because I'm thinking, whoa, I can't believe I did that all. But my most recent book came out earlier this year, Primordial. And then a few years ago was Yellow Rain, and before that was Afterland. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to kind of walk through each book briefly. So Afterland explores quite a few things that are related to my cultural history. I'm a daughter of Hmong refugees. My parents came to the States here in the early 80s, and they were resettled as refugees in the Midwest, and then they relocated to California, where we now live, where they live, and where I was born and raised in Fresno. And a lot of the work that I was exploring in Afterland was looking back at that history and at the war, particularly the Secret War, which was a war that was conducted by the CIA in Laos, whereby they exploited and used Hmong boys and men to fight a proxy war, to serve as a proxy army for them, and to do their work of war, essentially, to do their war bidding. Meanwhile, you had the larger war happening next door in Vietnam. And so many of my uncles and my grandfathers fought and served in the war, mostly my uncles on my mother's side. And there you also see one of the sort of leftover physical remnants of the war is the airstrip that the United States created in Siêng Khoang province, Long Teng, Laos, and the code name for this place was Lima Site 20A. It was sort of like considered the most secret place on Earth because it wasn't supposed to have existed anyway, but it was where they did a lot of their airdrops and delivery of cargo. And you can see that the airstrip, if you didn't lift off in time, you would probably hit that mountain. And there were many stories of when people were evacuating in 1975, and people were just shoved into these cargo planes, how there was so much fear that the planes would not lift because they were carrying far too much cargo. So that, to me, is a very symbolic place, this place that was supposed to not have existed. And then also in Afterland, I was exploring connections to shamanism, which is what my family practices, and looking at that in connection to into the experience of diaspora and war. And it took me to some really strange places, thinking about the role of ancestral power and afterlife, and how all of that gets impacted when a war happens. So here's this is, you can see here what a traditional shaman altar would look like, and what is very common to me to see a shaman doing the work of healing in a home setting. Moving on to my second book, Yellow Rain. This was an entire undertaking of about 10 years to be able to compose. And Yellow Rain, I won't get into the details of Yellow Rain as far as the nitty gritty, but it was it was a chemical biological weapon that was used against a lot of Hmong refugees as they were fleeing Laos and into Thailand. And the long story of it is that in the end, Hmong people were then gaslit for being led to believe that it never happened, that you don't know what's happening to you. It's not a chemical biological weapon. And so my whole work was about trying to sort of investigate these allegations and also challenge the dismissing of these allegations and the erasure of the people's testimonies related to that. So I went to the National Security Archive. I spent a week there digging through boxes and looking at documents. And I'll just sort of skim through all the stuff that I came across. I mean, this isn't all of it, but it's a quick sampling of all the paperwork, all the redactions, and all the charts, the test results of people's blood samples and whatnot to sort of uncover this mysterious substance that again, the US used as a way to kind of lobby Congress for more for more funding for weapons. Was what it came down to. So again, lots of stuff that I took, and then I took all of this, and I thought, how am I going to write a book out of this, And so I was very diligent in thinking about how to try to take all of that and turn it into a work of documentary poetry. So you can see, I'm not going to read any of these, but you can see these are sort of how the poems came out in the book, as a result of drawing from a lot of that documentation, a lot of declassified paperwork, government reports, and accessing various databases like the CIA's database too. Yeah, these visual ones are a little bit more stranger because they're a sequence that happens throughout the book, but they really unsettled my reader. seeing this in a collection of poetry is not what you're used to seeing, and so it really forces you to rethink the role of language. And then my most recent collection, Primordial, looks again at the war, but from a very different lens, from the lens of an animal, the saola, who is a highly rare and critically endangered animal that is endemic to the Annamite mountain range between Laos and Vietnam. And so I really drew from the saola and the saola's existence and also precarious existence to be able to compose these poems. Here's another node poem, which is very similar to the one that is published on the broadside. And here's the image of saola that is actually the same one that is on the cover of my book. This is from a camera trap photo in 1999. And this is the one that you can see where the saola is actually pregnant. So this is a pregnant saola in the image. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mai Der. I look at the image of saola, and I've known of this animal. I've heard of this animal, not that I've known of it, but you're the first poet or first writer that actually created an artwork out of this animal, and it's just so moving. And so I read some of your poem this morning, and there's like a few lines that I took notes, and one of which was, "You were gone before I could feed the wind." Wow, that is amazing. And thanks so much for sharing your book. My name is Tiffany Chung. I was here in 2012 as at MoMA, and so some people in the audience recognize me today. That makes me very happy. But anyway, so I hope that I can visit the city more often. Thanks, Arion Press, for bringing me on board. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about my work so that we can start having a conversation about the broadside. So, I am in the middle of preparing for my first mid-career survey exhibition, and reflecting on the 25 years of my career, I find it very challenging to just sum up what I have been doing or what my work is about. It's 25 years worth of work, right? So, a few things I could say is that my practice is research-driven, is interdisciplinary. It explores this very complex entanglement between history, politics, economy, geography, and climate, right? And it's across stretches of geological and generational time. So I'm not just interested in the here and now, but my work goes as far as Earth's deep time, thinking about the geologic records of the Earth. In this work right here this is I created this 150 architecture scale model of a floating village in response to all the warning about sea level rise due to climate change, and all the prediction of extreme floods that is, it has been happening. And this just simply kind of like a proposal, right? Not really creating anything new, but I did my research and just put together a lot of these vernacular architectural forms in Asia, especially Southeast Asia, and all these floating communities that live with this kind of chronic floods forever. And you could see from some of the work that I'm showing here that I work, across diverse media, from architecture to cartography, sculpture, photography, painting, video, and recently music. I've been working on a lot of projects with music, making music compositions and visualize these kind of invisible sonic fields. And in terms of scales, I'm doing something as miniature sculpture to with repurposed materials to something like an earthwork on the National Mall that is almost 200 feet across. And this work in particular, and if you see the map on the right side, is actually give me an opportunity to remap my own work. So I did this exhibition at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in 2019, and this map is from that exhibition. And I did a lot of research at the UNHCR archives in Geneva and interviewed people, more like talking rather than interviewing. But I was able to kind of like using all these very fragmented records to remap, to reconstruct the scale and the scope of this refugee migration. However, as a Vietnamese American, of course, I just needed to get it out of my system, try to map the movement of Vietnamese to all over the world, right? To as far as Africa, Middle East, Latin America, as opposed to just the West, like most of the popular discourse always talk about. So, but with the National Mall, what I was able to do was to remap this map. So I would take that map that I show you on like an embroidery on fabric, and I start like thinking about the land routes because the Hmong people, the Hmong refugees, and the secret war in Laos is not something that Hmong are not familiar with, but everyone else is unfamiliar with. So I thought the war in Vietnam, I mean, as much as we keep saying it's the Vietnam War, it's not. It was not just a war in Vietnam. It's the war, Laos and Cambodia, although those were considered sideshows, but still, I mean, the cause of the war, right? Like people still had to absorb the costs of that war. So I started mapping the land routes of the Vietnamese, of the Hmong, Laotians, and Cambodian to Thailand. So I think some of the names over there of the locations of refugee camps, I'm sure that your parents would know very well. So for the work at the National Mall, so I tried to include the land routes. So it's the first time I felt like they're just expanding it outside of just the Vietnamese refugees. And then, so this is one of the most recent projects when I start like looking at the ancient spice trade that started 3,500 years ago and mapping, the routes, but also thinking about the movement of people, the movement of spices cross borders and how that also led to, the movement of languages, the migrations of recipes, of cultures. And so part of it is in this kind of the first time I attempt to put this installation together that kind of combines different projects, but it's very reductive because I usually do various projects like ongoing simultaneously and just kind of take one out of every project and put together and think about different crossroads of progress of human-driven alterations of the landscapes. So I think one thing that I found that we have in common is that we really look at the landscapes as an active site of remembrance, right? So with the same work, the work with the mall at the mall is the same thing. I think about landscapes as witness of war memories because, like we move, but the landscape stays there, deal with all the herbicide spraying, all the environmental issues that the landscape bear witness and deal with it. So this is the work is from that kind of attempted installation, but this is a project that I look at the Neolithic circular earthworks in Vietnam and Cambodia, and also comparing it with the forms of the ditch enclosures in Europe, in particularly like Spain and Portugal. and try to speculate that kind of prehistoric global connections, but at the same time thinking about landscape modification and also kind of traces and marks that we left behind through, in this case, it's like depository practice. So, a lot of time when we think about places like this, we think about all the treasures that, archaeologists dig up, but it's really a lot of time and just garbage too. So, human remains, animal remains, trashed. So I mean, thinking about that, and then I did another project. So let me skip because I think I'm talking a little bit too long. So the last slides that I want to show is this petrified forest in Arizona, and then I also went to Giménez in eastern Germany for another petrified forest for the Permian period. So I think, I try to situate the human history as part of this kind of expansive natural history, just to remind myself and to remind us that, traces we leave behind really shape the future. And how do we take responsibilities for this? And how do we sustain the ecology? I think that's it. So this one is just to, start what I was thinking when I was approached by Arion Press to do a collaboration with you. So I was given your poems, and then I picked the one that we ended up with. And at first I thought, well, the history that we're sharing is that the fact that Sala is, like in that region, and then you see where I marked this kind of square, that is a combat area where my father, who was a helicopter pilot, was shot down in Laos in 1971. And that's the same area where Sala was also found. So when I heard about that, about your poem, and I thought, wow, that's the connection right there. And I know that you also talk a lot about comparing the Hmong with Sala, right? And so I thought this is very interesting in terms of talking about captivity. And like I read your poem, and I think you talk about Sala and human interchangeably. That's what I got from it. So maybe you can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, wow. I'm just sitting here listening, and yeah, I definitely felt when we first when we were first sort of introduced to each other, and the connection that you shared regarding your father and his relationship to that particular area where he was shot down, and that also being the homeland of Sala too. You're right. There is something about the landscape and the ecological spaces that will continue to sort of hold memory and absorb in that memory, right? And so we always feel an affinity for that space in our work, or something that we do. So I'm glad that came through, because I think a lot about that area. That area too, the mountain range is it's a border. It's the border between Laos and Vietnam, but it's also considered a refugium, the Annamite Mountains, because it, during the, a refugium being a place that can still harbor life and can still, plants and animal can still thrive in spite of inhospitable climatic conditions like the Ice Age, right? And so that was considered a refuge for anybody who was living there and taking refuge in there. So there is something very special about that mountain range, I think.
And I think also for those of you who are not familiar with that mountain range, it's actually where the Ho Chi Minh Trail runs through. So it's just historical context, and it gives you the sense of location.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but then so I thought about making a map.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, but maybe a map is too much, like too literal, too kind of like in the face. It gives too much information. Mm-hmm. And it's just not Sala at all. You know, like when you look at map, you tend to look for answer,
Yeah.
right? And then Sala is so elusive,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just so abstract. And also reading your poem, the way you structure it, I went all over the place. Like I didn't know, like, oh, you should go from this one dot, go up, go down. As a visual artist, I'm just like going all around and trying to make sense, right? Or create narrative.
Yeah. The poem itself, like I said earlier, it's an unusual poem, and it's sort of it is an engagement as much as it's something you read. You engage with it, right? You do the poem. You don't just read the poem, you know, and so I was worried. I'm like, well, you know, I hope you can make some sense of it, you know, and I'm glad you did. But what's so beautiful about it is that, and I was talking with Blake about it a while ago, is that you know, I mentioned the egg or an egg, and it was so remarkable how the artwork almost looks like an egg also as well, like a sort of like just a very slow dripping egg off the page. And I love the effect of how that sort of comes together in the language of the poem, but also in the visual too, of what you created. I wonder if I should.
I think you should read the poem.
Should I just go ahead and read the poem? Yeah, let me do that. Yeah, I was thinking that maybe it would help to read the poem. So for
How are you going to read it?
well, I'll read it. But for those of you who haven't seen the broadside yet, this is the poem on the broadside, and so there's a question about how to sort of approach it. And I think I think what's lovely and what's incredible about poetry is that the reader will bring to the poem what they make of it, and that only adds to the reading of that poem, more beyond what the poet, could have imagined for it. So I love hearing when people say, well, I read it this way and I read it that way. But I'll read it the way that I had thought when I had written it. If this is the egg of our resurgence, then let there be wild all our living. If this is how I carry on, how I claw to anything but normal in my home before home, how I drink the egg inside the aftermath, stringing into ritual, then where is the space that happens long before I enter? Where is the fire rippling of our resurgence, and what does it want with me, with you, with the animal in my dreams? I lost my spot. If every memory of beauty is a memory of home, and every exile a memory of earth, then let there come a time for blooming and lunations, a house in which to be wild and shout, dear friend in the blue sky, dear bodies and brains and ears and lips of all our living. So easy, right? I actually lost my spot, so. But it, you know, it just reads straight across, and you follow the dots and the nodes, and they take you to the next phrase. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a timeline. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit, because usually a broadside, it's, you know, it's a block of text. And so you got something that already had visual elements to it and had to build visual elements around it. And your work does that. You use maps, you use kind of collage. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to see that and how it informed, you know, how you conceptualized what you would build around it?
Yeah, so like I shared earlier, when we think about the history, the shared history, I thought of maps because that's what I do. But then because of this series that I've been working on, all the traces that I'm trying to retrace, they are so faint. They're like in the landscape, but you could barely see. And then it buried underneath the French colonial rubber plantations in both Vietnam and Cambodia. So you could barely, you know, see these traces, and it reminds me of Sala. And then I look at your poem, the structure of your poem, and of course, the egg is also one of the key words. And then I think about how do we kind of capture the essence of the poem of Sala, but at the same time have this circular earthwork to kind of embrace it. And then there's this opening on the right side that usually is a passage that just like where people coming in and out. And then I thought that is the perfect spot to start the first one, the first dot.
Yeah. There's a part in the earthwork where it just sort of has a break in the circle, and then it looks like the poem is coming out of that break, or out of that sort of disruption, or yeah, maybe a rupture of something, right? And here comes this egg. Egg. When I think of egg too, I'm thinking about sort of like how it can serve as the source of something, right? The beginning, the root of it, you know? But yeah, I love that you were thinking about that opening.
Yeah. And honestly, it's a lot of kind of blowing up and shrinking your poem on transparency and play around with my artworks. And I created a few before I ended up with the one that we use.
Yeah.
But Blake was very patient with me throughout, with color corrections and all.
I wonder if seeing this helped you reimagine it or gave it a new life. I think sometimes we write and then it's in our rear view. Yeah. And so I wonder like if it gave you a new relationship to the work. I mean, you described the visual of it, but then the text itself.
Yeah, well, you know, when I'm now thinking about like not just this one piece anymore. Now I'm looking at Tiffany's entire body of work, and I'm thinking, wow, I could have done a lot more too. I'm so excited now to kind of return to the craft of poetry. Like I love the floating village, and I thought, can I do a floating poem? Or what would it take to float a poem? And what does that even mean? So it sort of helps me kind of like push the boundaries of my own craft when I'm in conversation with someone who's just as talented and inspiring as you, Tiffany, because now I do want to do that. I do want to see how I can, map, sort of bring in mapping elements in my own work, right? But yeah, I think it really pushes me in my own craft, for sure.
I think you're already a visual artist in your own right. I think I look at the way you kind of compose these archival documents. Even visual artists have a hard time dealing with that kind of material.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, wow, I never thought of it.
I will certainly take that title.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you learned about collaboration. And to be fair, we're talking about two people. This was a collaboration with an entire organization.
Yes.
What does it? Because I think when we talked a little bit about this, artists, we work in such isolated, we're alone, and we do so much of our work alone. And here was a chance for you to have a discourse about the work. And so I wonder if you could just think about like the idea of collaboration writ large.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it feels risky because you're like, oh, I got to work with someone else, You're like, what if they don't like my work, or what if I can't do it right for them, So it's always this really interesting dynamic at first where you're not sure of the other, and it's really just about like spending time in each other's work without needing to feel the pressure to like create something out of it. I think we do feel the pressure to create, And if we can just allow ourselves to be immersed in the space of it and to take it in, it can feel less stressful. I know I was thinking to myself, wow, this is someone whose work is well beyond my own, and I get the opportunity to collaborate. And this is all thanks due to the folks here at Arion Press who brought us together, and who worked with us to figure out the technical details, like Blake and Caitlin and Sienna and Ted and everyone else who like like said, we've got, we can make this work, and getting us through all the technical issues too, I think helped us to see that this could be possible. I know Blake and I went back and forth about the typography size and figuring out how to do that. And I think Danielle was really helpful with figuring that out for us too. And so it was really a matter of just being able to see that it was possible to see the potential of what we could create. Because I think that's what collaboration allows, is that we don't see the potential. We see challenge, we see, dynamic, and then when you finally come together, what you can create is so much more than just yourself, right? When you are willing to collaborate.
Yeah, I think for me, the joy of working with someone else. Like recently, I've done a lot of collaboration with musicians, and it feels really refreshing, right? To go back and forth. And one thing I learned through this project and other collaborative projects is that you got to learn to trust people and also to let go of your control. I'm so OCD, and it's okay not let someone else be OCD for you. and Blake did such a good job, but but it's okay, even if it's not what you thought it was supposed to be. And another thing I think about is how do you take a step back, right? This is not just about you. It's a project, it's someone else's work, and not just one person, it's a team. So, how to take that step back and let someone else also control the narrative, control the products. And I think it's been fun.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about you've touched on it, but maybe a little bit more about how how your work has changed with after this collaboration, what you've learned. I think what you're also describing is how we learn about ourselves as much as we learn about someone else's work when we collaborate. And so wondering what the lessons are about your work and what it opened up for you both.
I just, the more I read your poems, the more I feel like, wow, I love the way you play with words. And in so many ways, we just use different forms, but we do very similar things, right? We had a conversation last night when we say there's always a balance. There's always a lot of nuances that we have to embrace in our work. And how do we tell the story? How do we control the narrative, but at the same time, be poetic and let people in? I think that's what I learned from poetry. That's what I learned from your poetry in particular. Yeah, that I'm the usage of words is so beautiful. I keep taking notes. I keep writing, and I'm sure I'm going to start citing what you say.
Well, I find that I take a lot of inspiration from your ability to sort of take those creative risks. Because I think for me as a poet, I think of my medium as the words and as the page. But I love thinking about the possibility of scale. Can I scale my poem big? You're working with scale. Can I work with scale? Would that be something that is just too out there? But then I see artists like you doing that, and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do that with language. And so it definitely has pushed me in ways that I wouldn't have thought before this collaboration, for sure. I really do want to think about that. I want to sort of explore the way that my words have an impact on the ecological space that I live in and that I exist in. The words that I'm saying right now, what is the sort of carbon footprint that I'm leaving behind in my voice, So that to me is exciting when I look at sort of the ways that we've been kind of just, in conversation, even in spirit, Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we probably have some time for questions, a couple questions. So someone has a microphone and we'll come around and.
Oh dear. I have to be on a microphone. It's a chicken and egg question. How did the two of you come together? You said that Arion Press kind of was the inspiration for, or put the two of you together. But which came first, the poem or the artist, or both simultaneously? Somebody say, well, we have a great poem, we want to put art to it. Or did somebody say, we have this fabulous artist, and where can we find a poem to put with it?
I think that's the answer for Ted.
Well, I mean, just on a very practical level, so, we had to be brought together. Like, we were introduced to each other, and I think I shared my poems, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if these poems are going to work out. I'm kind of going out on a limb here to offer these really unusual, unconventional pieces. We'll see what he says. We'll see. I don't know. and so it was a lot of doubt at first. But then when I think they connected with you, Tiffany, and they were able to sort of bring you in and say, is this a possible partnership? Like, can you, is there a way to work together? And I think, again, when I read your description of Saula, and I said, yeah, this is someone who I need to kind of put in my orbit, or I want to be in her orbit, And so, yeah.
Short answer, the poem came first.
Thank you for.
It's true, because when they approach me, they send me your manuscript and also a few poems. I'm sorry, but that's how I learned about your work. I think they have to convince me, right? I mean, this is my first time trying to do something like that. So
Yeah. But I think it worked out beautifully. And again, I think it takes the initiative that Blake and Ted had to sort of bring us together, to the vision behind that, I think is what allowed us to find, to work together and to have the opportunity to meet. Yeah.
And I think also like Padma from the Asian Art Museum was the matchmaker. So he introduced my work to Ted, and it went from there.
Mai Der and Tiffany, I wanted to thank you again for entrusting the work to the press. As many of you have seen, there were many different members of the staff at Arion who got to participate in the creation of the work. So it was truly a collaboration amongst across the entire team here. And, these works of, that bring together poets and artists really lie at the foundation of what we do. The books are their own kind of creature with all of their kind of elaborations and whatnot. But at the root of all of that really is this kind of exploration of the combination of text and image, and the power that can unleash, the conversations that can unleash, the ways that we can all gather around that. So thank you very much for entrusting it to us. It really is, I imagine, a little bit of a harrowing experience, particularly when it transacts over the internet, whatnot, and what have you. I do have a specific question, though, for Tiffany, just maybe to help clarify for the audience, because it's not quite clear, I think, in the visuals, the effect of your perforations, which are, what appears on screen as the kind of white stippled areas at the center of the mounds. Could you talk or address a little bit of kind of that process of kind of perforating the surface, and how that kind of plays into your practice?
Yeah, well, technically that part is all done by hand. So I start each of the works on the earthwork with drawing lines on vellum, layers of vellums, and cut and erase, and then kind of put them together and start with painting the traces of these earthen walls of the earthworks. And then the last part is like flipping everything, from back to the back, and then do the hand perforating one by one, each and every single dot. So this piece is small, so it was manageable, but my usual pieces are like poster size. I don't use inches very much. I know that it's like 110 centimeters by 70 centimeters wide. So it's a lot of poking and very meditative, and there's no templates. So, it allows a lot of imaginations, and then pushes the layers of vellums out. So in some of my work, when we frame, we have to frame them in this kind of very thick shadow boxes to let all these layers pushing one another out to create the sculpting effect, which is hard for, to achieve in reproduction. But you still can see the layers of vellum, so that's amazing. Because we photograph them one layer at a time. And then, so we got a photographer that Blake introduced in Houston, Peter, so he's also worked on that. So there's a big team, effort of everybody.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I like you said, the carbon footprint of my voice, and it's like something very personal and erosion removal, and then also this process of hand poking and cutting, and this process of kind of personal removal, but then also in the context of these very permanent things like the petrified forest and these stories of migration. And I'm wondering about that tension between this kind of personal ephemeral and this deep history. It's reflected in both your work, and it really seems to come together here. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and if that played a part in this for you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think when I'm sort of meditating on, my time in my short time in the existence of this universe and of the timeline, right, of history, it's so humbling to always remember how my time is so fleeting, and how I'm just a blip in everything else, and so everything that I make now, even this book will someday decompose, and it's paper, right? So there's something beautiful about that, right? Even as much as I would love for my book to be something that someone can tangibly hold for centuries. There's a letting go in realizing that everything is fleeting, and a sort of an embrace of that, and a willingness to be okay with that, right? That I am just a tiny blip in this incredibly large universe that we live in, and that always humbles me. So when I'm having a bad day, I just got to remember just put it all into perspective, right? I'm just here I am, sharing this existence with others, and we can all sort of cope, figure out how to get through it together, right? We're all affected together. We're in this together in a way. So I think that's what I try to keep in mind when I sort of think about the vast and immense tension between things that are ephemeral and what I'm creating, and my, like I said, the carbon footprint of the voice that I leave behind, right? At least that, that hopefully, that will do some good, I hope, right?
Yeah, I think, when I started learning about the petrified forest, especially the one in Giménez, in Arizona, you actually get to see it. I love the Blue Mesa. I would hike, and I would stand on a high ground, waiting for the sunset, doing the time lapse on the camera, and thinking about what is it like if I get buried here with these ancient landscapes. But then I went to Chemnitz in Eastern Germany, where it's known for like rally of neo-Nazi every Monday. And they have this Permian forest, petrified forest, buried underneath the city. So the scientists only get to dig like 2 small lots. But then they are studying this whole kind of intact world of like 2,095 million years ago. And it really put things in perspective for me. I feel like, wow, we are so tiny and we are just passing by. And we also, I was so used to thinking about everything within our human time span. But looking at the petrified forest and trying to incorporate that in my work, in my world, make me feel like what you said, very humble and think how small we are. But we leave massive traces behind. So, something needs to be done about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.